to watch what I say.
Okay. Good evening, and welcome everybody. My name is Chris Eberly. I'm president of Anne Arundel Bird Club, and we've had real good discussion. A lot of familiar faces to some people who haven't connected in for a while. I guess I'd like to start. Sue and Alan, do you want to give a field trip update?
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Go ahead.
So since our last meeting, our first walk was Masonville Cove. And I want to talk about that a little bit because they opened up a new trail called the Upland Trail. And it lets the folks go back to the dredge site, just like Swan Creek used to. And wow, what a difference. I'll try not to go too far on this, but going on the Upland Trail, we have lots and lots of waterfowl already. We had shovelers and gadwall and mallards and blackcocks and green-winged teals and a redhead and lesser scaup and buffleheads and ruddies and an eared grebe. Really nice. We had, and these were all, Sue and I started doing a little bit of scouting there before they opened it up in September, and it's been like that. We had 3 long-billed dowitchers in one little spot on the close-up sand pit. So it's really nice.
We had 51 avocets one day.
I'm talking about right at the Bay Bridge. You know, when I'm not the Bay Bridge, the Harbor Tunnel. When you go through the Harbor Tunnel, you don't actually go through, you just get off and go around less than a mile. And there's an upland trail now that lets you go out and actually walk out to the dredge. It's about 0.93 miles, and it's got some big rocks and stuff, so you have to walk slow and have sturdy shoes, but it's a great spot and I recommend it very much. It's very fun. We went there and we had on our trip for our group, we had 76 species, and it was really fun, including, I'll tell you about the sparrows because this is really interesting for a place like that. Grasshoppers and field, white crown, the white throats, the Vesper, Nelsons, Savannah, Song, Lincoln. It's just really cool. I mean, you don't see that many sparrows in a place like that in the middle of the city, because when you're walking along, you're actually looking at the skyline of the city. So it's cool. That was that one. Then we had 2 unfortunate things. We had 2 cancellations. The Crystal Springs Farm, Ross Garrison had a family emergency, and we had to cancel that one. And the Greenberry Point, we had terrible weather that day, and that's been rescheduled to go off February 26th. So we just pushed it out a little bit. We'll be in the nice time for going to Greenberry Point for the waterfowl. We started November with our usual kinder farm for our once a month there. We had 36 species, 9 folks. All the winter birds are coming back. Everything you would expect to come back is there. We didn't have any real rare migrants or anything, but it was a very nice morning. And one of the highlights for me was all the eastern bluebirds, because the work that they're doing with the monitoring of the boxes and the management and so on. I mean, it's not unusual to go there and get 30, 40 eastern bluebirds, which is really cool. So a lot of kudos to people like Linda Bitchock and others that are working on that. I think there's 75 active boxes there now. Wow. Then Sue has mentioned Seebeck. We went to Seebeck, and Adele Claggett led that walk for us. This was her first walk she's led. And we had a wonderful day there. Let's see. Whole bunch of folks showed up. We had 45 species. It was the same. We had lots and lots of the waterfowl, which they're famous for at Seebeck. Dawn was there with us. Some of the cool things, we had 7 common loons already, and had surf scoters, and all the ducks are coming back. And then for a lot of enjoyment, we had 15 of the brown-headed nuthatch, and everybody loved that because they were 10 feet away from us playing in the bushes and stuff, and it was just fun. And Judy Wink, who is the associate executive there, gave us a big presentation about all the kinds of work that she's doing, which was really fun. And then Adele took us back to not only look at the educational owls and so on that were there, but she also went into her kestrel area, got her little kestrels out and had them flying around for us and going from place to place. And so they have a number of birds there that they use for educational purposes, which was really fun. We've already mentioned tomorrow, we're starting off the next session between now and the next meeting with the Conquest Reserve with Dan Small leading it, and we're really excited about that. Looking for the rest of the month, Blackwater's coming up. We're going to have our Blackwater Black Friday annual, you know, in memory of Barbara Riccardi. And then on the 5th of December, we have a Jug Bay walk. So we're being busy. We're having, you know, we're reaching our goals of 10 people or so. In fact, we've had a couple of times we've gone off with maybe 10 or 12, you know, some are close. So it's all been good. You want to add anything, Sue? Okay. Thank you.
Have you communicated with Ross to see if he might be trying to reschedule the Crystal Farm?
Yeah, he said he would try to reschedule it.
Okay. So we'll
It
announce
looks like
that.
yeah, it looks like they are going to be building that. They had a hearing last week. Did anybody go to that? It looks like that senior built center thing's going up there. The senior
He made some kind of a deal
residential.
where they're going to have a long-term plan, which is going to preserve a lot of the area. They're also going to have this additional thing built there. So, and I think that was Gerald Weingart to put that out as to our club. We got a report from it.
Okay. Any other announcements?
Where was Alan just talking about?
A Crystal Farm down in Annapolis.
Oh, okay. Okay. Did anyone testify on Lisa Rodvian's bill on Monday?
I worked with Kurt Schwarz for Anne Arundel Bird Club. MOS submitted a joint written testimony to that. And then I also had my board chair, that is the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership board chair, Dave Wilson, submitted on behalf of the Bird Conservation Partnership. And I don't know, I think there were 10 letters of written testimony and 5 in-person people that gave testimony.
Do we know the result?
It was voted down, 2 in favor, 5 against. And oh, sorry, Dave, this is your update. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
I asked Dave if he could give an update on that.
Okay, I can. I also submitted testimony, just brief written testimony, and it was a shame it got voted down. But I guess, and in case some people haven't heard of this bill, it's very similar to the Sustainable Buildings Act, which was a statewide bill which has failed to get passed for the last 2 years, but has gained traction. But this Anne Arundel County level bill was designed to be very specific, and it was designed to really just to cut down on the reflectivity of the building surfaces in new buildings which are non-residential in the county, and it uses the mechanism it uses for measuring the reflectivity of the surface was the bird threat factor, which is something developed by the American Bird Conservancy, their building collisions program. And so it's very narrow in its focus, and it's unfortunate that it got voted down.
Jack put in the chat, he's working with some people at the city of Annapolis to see if they can put forth a similar bill within the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's the statewide effort that's ongoing as well. Okay.
Chris, before
yeah.
everybody got on, I mentioned that we're continuing our saw-whet banding program at CERC. It's a particularly low numbers year. We have caught a few birds, some interesting long distance travelers that we've been able to record. It's part of a national program and will continue, I suspect, in the future. It's clearly not an eruption year. It's like one of our worst so far. We have 6 birds total for the year, and we only have about another week left in our banding program. So they are doing a little more like normal catches up in Pennsylvania, New York, even Maine. I'm not sure about the other Maryland stations, but Andy Brown, for example, down in Calvert County reports fairly low numbers as well. So they haven't come this far south either yet or at all this year, which is not unusual, but makes for data anyway. 0 birds is data as well as lots of birds. So just to report that. And the other thing I mentioned was a nice female harrier at Sands Road Park at the intersection with Bayard Road and Sands Road in Anne Arundel County.
Yeah, and keep us apprised of the efforts to make public all the not so good things going on at Sand Roads.
I'll CC you, Chris, and then you can decide if you want to pass it out to the crowd.
Okay, sounds good. I just posted a link in the chat for, I don't know if it's still out there, for the bill 9521 that has the details. If you're so inclined to read the details of a bill that first go around has been defeated, but hopefully we'll have another try.
Could make an announcement, Chris.
Sure, yeah.
In connection with the chimney swift nesting tower project.
Yep.
That we have to thank Catherine Sterling, who is one of our attendees tonight, I believe. She's on the board of the Friends of Quiet Waters Park, and the board voted to offer us $1,000 towards creating a tower in Quiet Waters Park in an area that they're turning into a wildflower meadow. I was there yesterday with Catherine and the park superintendent, Allison Woodfield, and park ranger, looking over the site, which looks like a very appropriate one for a tower.
Great. Yeah, just build it, and well, maybe the birds haven't come, but we're attracting a lot of other attention and interest with this, which is exactly what we want to do to help spread the word, and hopefully get more people interested in putting up these towers to help chimney swifts, which have undergone about a 67% decline over the last 50 years. So anything we can do to help swifts, all the other aerial insectivores, all the other birds that have gone downhill in the last few decades is great. So thanks for that update, Pete. Yeah, we're rocking and rolling with these things, which is great.
Well, thank Catherine. She's
Yeah, Catherine, thank you. This is great.
Yeah, you're welcome if you can hear me now. I was muted,
Yeah.
but
Oh, so yeah,
happy
we
to
can
do
hear you.
it. Very excited, and we're just going to get it built.
Great. All right. Any other announcements before we get into the program? Just as a reminder, next month, Colin Reese will give a program on the Chesapeake Bay, the future we face, looking at the challenges within the Chesapeake Bay ecosystems from climate change and other threats. So yeah, I'll remind everybody, if you're not muted, if you could mute yourself so we don't get any extraneous noises during the presentation. And it's a real pleasure to get Dave Curson talking to the Bird Club. I think it's been a while since he's done a talk like this. And I think a lot of you know Dave. His kind of full bio was in the newsletter earlier, so I won't read all of that, but I think a lot of you may know him through the iBird I Vote Summit. Dave leads Audubon's Coastal Resilience Program in Maryland. And he also represents Audubon on the management board of Atlantic Coast Joint Venture, which is doing a lot of good work for things like black rail and other declining coastal species. With that, Dave, I will turn it over to you. We are all looking forward to hearing about these artificial nesting islands and the great success they've been so far.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Chris. And thanks everyone for having me to come and speak. You know, I think the last time I spoke to Anne Arundel Bird Club must have been about 10 years ago, quite a while ago, I think. There's been a few changes since then at Audubon. Just to let you know, you're probably, many of you are probably aware of this, but Audubon Maryland, DC merged with Audubon Pennsylvania a bit less than a year ago to create the Audubon Mid-Atlantic program. So it's now a regional program, which brings a bit more capacity in terms of staff functions to us, which is a good thing. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, first of all, let me just get back to the beginning of the presentation here.
And make sure you click that share the sound.
Yes, I will do. Thank you for the reminder.
Yep.
Share sound, optimize for video. And oops, did I just share the wrong? I think I must have shared. Let's see if I can get that correct again. Okay, here we go. So can everyone see the screen as it should be?
Yeah, it looks good, Dave.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I'm going to talk today about a new project which Audubon has been involved with. And I should start right off by acknowledging our two main partners. I've been working very closely with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, who've been funding the project, and the Maryland Coastal Bays Program, who are based down in Ocean City. So they have staff on the ground close to the project site. And we've been working as a partnership for about a year and a half now on this project. So yeah, let me just jump straight in. So what's driving this project is the fact that many of our endangered or our colonial waterbirds, our seabirds nesting in the coastal bays, are now endangered. And 3 species in particular have really been declining over the last 20 years. Black skimmers are now state endangered. They have declined so much that there used to be over 200 pairs in Maryland about 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And now for the last couple of years, no black skimmers have nested successfully at all in the state. The common terns are doing a little bit better, but they have still suffered an enormous decline. And now they have a sizable colony. I believe there's only one sizable colony of common terns left in the state, and that's on Poplar Island. And there's just a few small colonies in the coastal bays and elsewhere. Royal tern is another species which has declined very much, and no royal terns have nested successfully in Maryland for the past couple of years as well. So the situation is quite dire for these birds, and they've all been listed as endangered in Maryland now. So what's been driving this decline? Perhaps the major factor in the loss of these birds, which they nest on open sandy islands and beaches, is the main factor is the erosion of islands where they nest. And one of the best known colonies of a variety of colonial waterbirds is Skimmer Island in Ocean City. You can see it as you go over the Route 50 bridge into Ocean City if you look to your left. And this is an aerial view of Skimmer Island back in 2010. It was still, relatively big, although it had been eroding for some years. And you can see there's some vegetation there and a lot of exposed beach. And at this time, there were several hundred terns, royal terns, common terns, as well as black skimmers nesting on it, and quite a few different heron species as well. So the erosion of Skimmer Island carried on for quite a few years, and this is 2021, and you might think, well, this doesn't look a whole lot different from 2010, but in the intervening time, the island had eroded and actually been replenished with sand, with dredged sand by the US Army Corps in 2012 to 2015. And subsequently, Skimmer Island is eroded again. It's just a continuous ongoing process, this erosion. And you can see the shape of the island is a little bit different from the previous version. It's also moved a little bit with the currents moving the sand around. Well, this year, Skimmer Island is pretty much sunk beneath the waves. Here's a photo of it less than a month ago. And you can see at high tide, there's almost nothing left. The sand is only just poking above the water. Really, this island is no longer usable at all for nesting by birds. Birds can kind of roost on it and feed on it and rest like these birds you see, but there's no exposed beach that is safe from high tide. And this has happened to a lot of islands in the coastal bays system. I'll show you more of those in a minute. Another reason for the decline of these island nesters is human disturbance. You might have noticed on those aerial shots a couple of minutes ago that there were little dots around some of the beaches, some of the islands in the Isle of Wight Bay there, and they were boats. And boaters like to visit these islands. And some of them, even though they're posted by the DNR to try to keep people off, people will pull up their boats and let their dogs run around on them. This photo shows a dredged spoil island that was rebuilt in 2015. We called it Tern Island, and we had high hopes for it. Before DNR posted it, there was a bit of an invasion by people with boats who kind of set it up as a party island. We did manage to get the island posted the following year, and that kept people off. But the island eroded again totally. So that reinforces this idea that erosion is just a huge problem. One of the things that Audubon has done in the past few years to try to reduce disturbance at these islands is to work with Assateague Coast Kids. Dave Wilson helped us work with the Coast Kids to produce children's artwork, which we turned into laminated signs. And these signs got put up all around Ocean City. And even the Ocean City Board of Public Works even posted these for us at docks and boat ramps and places like that, as well as bait and tackle shops. So I think these have probably been helping to kind of tell people that they reinforce the message that they shouldn't be disturbing these islands. And then a third reason for the decline of these island nesters is predation. Typically, it's large seabirds like large gulls, herring and great black-backed gulls are a big problem, and crows as well. But one thing that has been discovered through the use of remote cameras at night is that great horned owls will also visit tern colonies. And here's a picture. This is Skimmer Island back more than 10 years ago now, in 2010. And a great horned owl is helping itself to an adult common tern there. So they can really cause problems and cause, once there's a significant predation event in one of these colonies, the whole colony will desert and not use the site for maybe a couple of years afterwards. So predation can be a real problem as well. So the coastal bays system is one of Maryland's important bird areas. Audubon identified it as an IBA years ago. And I should let you know that our very own Lynn Davison was one of our committee that identified this important bird area, as well as all the other important bird areas in Maryland. So thanks, Lynn. The whole coastal bay system is an important bird area for these island nesting seabirds, but also large colonies of herons, egrets, and ibises, and thousands of wintering waterfowl. And of course, it's flanked, the whole bay system is flanked by salt marshes, which are probably the best salt marshes for salt marsh sparrow. And salt marsh sparrow is a globally vulnerable species with only a population of probably less than 50,000 in the world now. But I guess we're here to talk about the seabirds, so we'll get back to them. A couple of years ago, Audubon, we got a grant from the Maryland Coastal Bays Program to produce a report on the state of the colonial waterbirds of the coastal bays and the islands that they nest on. And we detailed the state of each island with this schematic map. You can see symbols for disturbance, the state of the birds, and erosion. The kind of the wave symbol on the left of each panel is erosion. And you can see just how many of them are in the red, which means that they were suffering pretty badly from all of these influences, and their birds were declining very sharply. So the state of these islands is really very bad. We've lost, I believe, 3 or 4 major colonial sites entirely to erosion. And there's very few of common tern, black skimmer, and royal tern left. We'll take a look at each of these species a little bit. This is the state in 2017. So this is 4 years out of date, but it's the last that we had good data for. And we put this data in this report. So this is the data reported in this report. So common terns will nest on a variety of islands and salt marsh and barrier islands as well. They'll nest in small colonies and they'll readily use a lot of artificial situations. There's many examples around the world of common terns nesting on piers and embankments and old barges and artificial situations like that. But still, common terns have declined drastically in the coastal bays. Royal terns are a little bit different in their breeding requirements. They tend to like really remote, inaccessible sites, and they prefer to nest in very large, dense colonies. They pack themselves in. They need kind of 100 or 200 pairs to really be successful, and they need an island that is big enough that the chicks can roam around once they've hatched. They form a large creche and they move around the island, so they like to kind of walk about. they haven't been recorded nesting on small artificial rafts and things like this, although they have taken to a large barge that the Virginia Department of Conservation placed down at Hampton Roads 2 years ago. But as I said earlier, royal terns are now not nesting successfully at all in Maryland. Just 4 years ago, we had about 150 pairs, as you can see from the map here, in 3 colonies. Black skimmers are an interesting bird. They're very distinctive and they're larger than common terns, but they're not very aggressive. The terns are good at defending their colonies by dive bombing intruders. Black skimmers don't do this. What they do is they go and form a colony on the edge of a common tern colony, and so that the common terns will actually protect the site for them. So if you're going to attract black skimmers to nest somewhere, you need to have a colony of common terns that's active. So black skimmers have been recorded nesting on wooden platforms in 1 or 2 instances, but not nearly as much as common terns. So there's a real need to rebuild the natural islands in the coastal bays. And this was actually recognized in a US Army Corps report, a feasibility report and environmental impact statement that was produced for the coastal bays back in 1998. However, despite a few years of nourishment, sand nourishment of Skimmer Island, there has not, so far, there hasn't been any program of rebuilding these islands, and we hope to try to get that going in the future. But for now, as a stopgap measure, we need something a little bit different. And we started looking into this a year and a half ago, and we found quite a few examples around North America of artificial islands and platforms that did support terns. 4 of these examples that you can see here are for common terns, but the middle one is actually a successful example of a large platform being used by Caspian terns in Washington. So if we look at the whole picture here, the proposed strategy that we think is right for recovering these birds is a kind of a twofold strategy, basically. Firstly, we do want to try to recover breeding populations of common tern, royal tern, and black skimmer to their historical peak levels. And the best chance of doing that is in the coastal bays. But we need to focus on, in the long term, on creating and maintaining dredge material islands. And we'll need to develop a sand management plan in partnership with the US Army Corps and the Department of Natural Resources and other agencies like Fish and Wildlife, as well as the town of Ocean City, to do that. And that'll probably take a few years to get in place. But in the meantime, the best chance that we have of providing nesting areas for these birds is to use artificial nest platforms as a stopgap measure. So we devised this project a little over a year ago. And in order to put this in place, first of all, we had to overcome a couple of challenges. We had to try to find a good location in the coastal bays. And we were looking for a place that was relatively protected, that the wave energy would not be too much for the platform. We wanted a place that wouldn't get disturbed too much by boaters and others. We wanted to try to avoid predation by gulls, crows, and owls, as well as any mammals that might swim out there, like raccoons or foxes. We also wanted to try to make the permitting process as easy as possible. So we had to avoid certain places. We wanted to avoid the Assateague Island National Seashore because putting this within federally owned waters would have complicated the permitting quite a bit. We began the permitting process a little over a year ago with a joint evaluation meeting. That's a meeting where the two main regulatory agencies look at your materials before you actually apply officially for the permit. These are the US Army Corps of Engineers and the Maryland Department of Environment, but they invite many other agencies to a meeting as well. So Fish and Wildlife, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and many other agencies, DNR as well, come along and look at your project and give you some pointers, things you need to adjust to get your permit through, which is a really helpful process. At this meeting, we told them that we needed the permit by early April because we wanted to launch the island, the raft in the middle of April. We finally got the permit on the 3rd of May this year. And the NDE is very understaffed in terms of how many people they have. So they're working under real pressure, and they really pulled all the stops out to get the permit to us, even by early May. So that process by which we found the location, where did we come up with? Well, we produced a GIS map, and it told us that the best place was just on the south side of South Point Spoils Island. You can see in the inset map, Chincoteague Bay is in green, and the bays are kind of color coded according to, in general, how much boat traffic disturbance there is. So the further away from Ocean City you go, the less disturbed it is. We decided to go down in Chincoteague Bay. We figured that on the south side of South Point Spoils, it would be fairly protected from rough waters because it's shallow, it's about 4 feet deep, and it's kind of surrounded by 1 or 2 islands and sandy shoals that kind of break the energy of the swell as it comes across the bay. And here's the bathymetry of the site. So the project site is marked by that red star. The little bird symbol to the north of the red star was the place that we did a little reconnaissance trip in September 2020, and we thought that would be just a fine place for it. But we were told by MDE that we needed to put it in slightly deeper water because the design of our raft would have had it resting on the bottom of the bay if we'd put it in 2 foot deep water. So they moved us out to a site where the water was 4 feet, and that worked just fine. So South Point Spoils is that little sandy strip in the middle of this picture. And I guess I should add that South Point Spoils is the site of the largest heron, egret, and ibis colony in the coastal bays. There's over 2,000 birds of 7 different species nesting there. Okay, so while we were waiting for our permits, we ordered, or rather the DNR ordered materials, and we hired 2 local builders in Ocean City to actually build individual raft units that we could later connect together to form this nesting platform. And these 2 builders were John Collins and Todd Peterson. They were wonderful to work with, very talented, very committed to the conservation mission of this project. And they did a fine job. And when they had created the first of the 8 rafts that it took to build the island, they sent us this fantastic time-lapse photography series. So here's how to build a wooden raft in about 1 minute. And here's the second raft they were building. And you can see that if you see those floats that they had fitted, they're plastic floats that are hollow inside, and they have wheels on. and we put wheels on these units so that we could actually transport them easily off a truck and onto the boat ramp where we launched them. And the reason why we built our nesting platform out of these smaller raft units was that we designed the raft units to be 8 feet wide, and that is a width that we can easily wheel them down any boat ramp and then assemble them in the water to a larger size once they're in the water. Oh, okay. So when we received our permit on the 3rd of May, and the very next day we convened staff from DNR and Coastal Bays Program and Audubon, and also some local volunteers. And you can see some of the process of launching here. We got a rollback truck from the Maryland Forest Service. The local guys from MFS came and helped us transport these the rafts from an adjacent property where the property owner had very kindly offered to let us store them for a little while. So we just wheeled them down into the water, pulled them around the side of the boat ramp, and then the first step was shown in this photo at the top here, where we took 2 of these 8 foot wide rafts and we connected them together with steel plates to make a 16 foot by 16 foot raft. And then, as you'll see later, it took 4 of those to create the whole island, which was 32 feet by 32 feet. Once we had these 16 by 16 foot units, we needed to put nesting substrates on top of the deck of these rafts so that the terns could nest on that. And here is a machine loading 1 ton of crushed clamshell for each of these units. And once that was on, our volunteers raked it out so that we had an even layer that was about 2 inches deep. And this worked really well. And you can see the aerial shot here of what that looked like, covered with volunteers with rakes and other tools. So once we had these 16 foot by 16 foot units, we towed each of these out to the project site. And here's a picture of Jim McCann of the DNR's Wildlife and Heritage Service, happily manning the boat, or one of 3 boats that took these raft units out to the project site. The other boat operators were Jonathan McKnight and our very own David Brinker. So once they were at the project site, we had to connect 4 of these 16 foot by 16 foot units together. And here's the island the moment that we finally got it all connected. And our builders came up with an ingenious method for doing that. Down the side, the joins between these rafts have latches on. And so what we did was that there's 2 latches on each of those joins. So there would be, if you can see my cursor, there's a latch here, a latch here, here and here, here and here, here and here. And you literally just push these things together. And because they're floating at the same level, they just latch together, and then you can lock those with a bolt. And the island is in one piece. We then anchored out the corners with long anchor lines, and we used plow anchors to secure them. Okay, so with the island in place, we needed to add a few accessories to it. First of all, we needed to use, we used social attraction to try to attract common terns to the island. And we had 2 forms of this. We had a bunch of decoys that were made of plastic, vinyl plastic. And we ordered 100 of these, and then we realized, well, we don't really need that many. So we used 30 of them, 20 black tern decoys and 10 black skimmer decoys. And you can see on the picture of the raft on the left, some of the decoys in place there. And then we also used audio signals. So we used an audio lure, which broadcast the colony sounds of a common tern colony. And we have on the left, you can see underneath that solar panel, which powered the audio lure, you can see the speakers that broadcast the sound. And on the right here, for anyone who's kind of an electrical wizard, this just shows you the circuitry that put it together. And I have to credit here Dave Brinker. Dave Brinker is the genius that designed all these social attraction systems, and he put this whole thing together. And he's also, I should also acknowledge that we worked together on these slides. So this talk is very similar to a talk that he gave a few weeks ago. So we're tag teaming very closely on this. So you can see that we had a 12-volt battery, which was recharged by the solar panel. And the circuitry, you can see it also powers these marker lights. So at each corner of the platform was a light, which we were mandated to have by the permit to stop boats kind of bumping into it at night. And there was a photo switch, which basically turned the marker lights on at sunset and turned the audio lure off at sunset. And then it reversed that again at sunrise, so that we had colony sounds in the day and marker lights at night. So an ingenious setup. Well, we wanted to monitor the island pretty closely, and it was Dave Brinker who pretty much did all the monitoring. Not only did he set up the remote video cameras that we had there, he also visited the site at least once a week and very carefully documented what we found there. So after the first few weeks, we didn't really have any signs of colonization by common terns, even though it was getting into late May. And we'd been wondering why. Dave had seen a pair of oyster catchers on the island in early visits, and he actually found a nest. They laid 3 eggs. But the remote cameras that he set up enabled us to figure out why the common terns weren't setting up shop on the island. So I'll play you a little clip here of what we found. Here's the you'll see the oyster catchers in action here. You can see a common tern settled on the raft, but the oyster catchers were very territorial, and they kept chasing terns off. So for the first month that we had the island out there, common terns couldn't establish any nest pairs. But we had some luck. A herring gull also set up a nest on the island, and what we think happened is when the oyster catchers eggs hatched, the herring gull ate the young, which normally is a bad thing, but for us it was kind of a good thing because it got rid of the oyster catchers and enabled common terns to start establishing nests on the island. As soon as those baby oyster catchers disappeared, the adults became less territorial, and terns started visiting the island in larger numbers. And we had the first common tern egg laid on the 23rd of June. And about 3 weeks later, we had the first chick hatch in this photo. You can also see in the photo of the chick, one of the 10 or so wooden chick shelters that we put out on the island to provide the chicks with shade from the sun, but also protection from predators like gulls if they would visit the island. So once things had got established with the common terns on the island, we had the kind of happy scenes of a common tern colony, and the remote video cameras captured this nicely. This is the day after the first common tern egg was laid. You can see courtship activity there, with a couple of pairs courting each other and staking out their territory. Okay, and another behavior you can see here is what happens when a ring-billed gull settles on the island to eat a crab. The common terns are well known for a very effective defense against intruders, and you can see the common terns dive bombing the gull here. So that first common tern chick that hatched in the mid-July, we managed to capture it at 2 days old, hiding underneath the parents. Now, once we had young, or rather, once we had quite a few nests with eggs of the common terns, Dave decided that we would go out and band at least one adult of each of the nesting pairs. And then through the summer, we would try to band all of the nestlings, the chicks. And the reason for doing this is we want to try to see, want to learn more about the behavior of these birds in terms of, once they've nested here, will they become faithful to this site and come back? So next year, when we take the rafts back out and common terns return, we want to know, are these the same birds that nested in the first year? And that level of site fidelity is going to help us to run the project through future years. So I was lucky enough to go out there with Dave, and we had some other volunteers, and we used these cage traps to catch the adult birds. And the way we would do this is we would put the cage trap over the nest of each nesting pair. And of course, the adults would fly away as we approached. But because the egg was on the nest, they would return to it and walk in the door of the cage. And we had it triggered with a little piece of wood that the bird would knock as it went into the cage and then release the door. Now, to prevent any damage to the eggs in this process, what we did was we actually took the real egg and put it in a padded box and replaced it with a dummy egg. And the terns would just settle down on the dummy egg. So we didn't have any breakages of the eggs, luckily. And you can see here on the left, a picture of a very young chick receiving its leg band. And in order to band these birds, we took them back to the boat where Dave had his box of banding equipment. And after taking measurements of the birds and placing the leg.
All set. Bye.
Bye-bye.
We released each bird. So with our remote cameras, we actually got some other interesting scenes of colony life out there. And I should mention that we set these cameras up. At first, we just had 2, but we ended up with 4, 1 on each quarter of the platform. And we, after some trial and tribulation with the internet connection, the hotspot wouldn't work for the longest time, but Dave finally got it to work. And we had consistent streaming in daylight hours of the of life on the island. And so Dave has been able to select a few choice little clips of video here. Let's see. This shows an adult tern trying to give a fish to a chick, which is way too big for that chick to swallow. And keeps trying. But the chick isn't interested. Realizes it can't swallow, but here comes a larger chick, an older one. And takes it. But even the large chick has trouble swallowing this fish. It can be a problem in some colonies when there aren't enough fish of the right size to feed chicks. And this is happening with quite a few seabirds. Puffins up in Maine are suffering this problem, where due to climate change, there aren't enough of their regular food type. And the parents bring fish that are too large for them to swallow. So quite a few of the young puffins will starve in that situation. So I believe this chick ultimately was able to swallow this fish. And another interesting thing that happened out there on the platform was that we had some pretty rough weather. In early July, we had, I think it was one of the first hurricanes of the 2021 season that actually made its way up the East Coast afterwards. By then it was just a tropical storm, but it still packed wind gusts of 55 miles an hour. And the remote cameras showed us what those winds did, how it looked at night as the storm came over. You can see how the raft is flexing at the joints there. You can see there's quite a lot of motion, and you can see the waves breaking over the side of the raft. Now, this is when there were 6 pairs of common terns nesting on the raft at this particular date, and they all had eggs, and all of those nests survived this night. So it's really interesting to document rough conditions, a lot of movement of the raft, but the raft held steady in place. It stayed on its anchors, didn't move. And we think that the flexing at the joints there actually allows the raft to kind of absorb some of the energy of waves. So I think the design is really well suited to these conditions. Okay. So after a successful nesting season, I'll show you the data of how many pairs nested in just a minute. But we decided that at the end of the breeding season, the best thing to do was to actually bring the island in to shore. So on the 20th of September, we had a crew that came out, and we basically did the launch day in reverse. We dismantled the island into its 4 constituent 16 by 16 foot rafts and towed each one of those back to shore. And then we took the steel plates off and separated those units into the 8 foot by 16 units and pulled them out of the water onto a truck and put them in storage. And over winter, we'll scrape off all the barnacles and the and seaweed that had colonized the bottom of the raft. And you can see here the line that shows where the water line was when they were floating in the bay. We've got a lot of seaweed there, a lot of barnacles as well. And the amazing thing is that the wheels still rotated freely after several months in the coastal bays. So when these were pulled out of the water, they just wheeled out really nicely. A lot of the barnacles kind of got scraped off the wheels by that action. And then we just winched them onto this rollback and took them to storage. So it worked just beautifully. It was a really successful process. So the season was really an enormous success. We were just blown away with how smoothly everything went. I don't want to jinx us for next year, but it was really very rewarding. So what we have in summary was 23 pairs of common terns established nests, and just 3 of those got depredated. We don't know by what, but very likely it would have been herring gulls, I think. The mean clutch size was 1.8, so 42 eggs were laid altogether, and 36 of those eggs hatched, and 22 of those young actually successfully fledged. So this was actually pretty good nest success for a colony that established pretty late in the season. Often the later that a common tern colony gets established, the less successful it will be. And this was about a month later than what would be typical in Maryland, because we had the first egg in the last week of June, and usually the egg laying period for the terns is through middle and late May. We managed to band 19 adults, and I think we banded 21 of those chicks, or maybe more. I'm not sure of the exact number there, but this was really successful. So with that, I'd like to take any questions, and we can talk a little bit about our plans for next year as well. So I'll open it up for questions.
Why are you treating it as a temporary approach?
In terms of, do you mean why are we taking it out each winter, or why are we thinking of it as a stopgap measure in the larger strategy?
Both.
Both, okay. Well, first of all, the reason we're taking it out of the water for the winter is that the storms that come through in the winter are quite rough, just as rough as Hurricane Elsa was. And although the island performed really well in that storm, I think we're pushing our luck if we just leave it out there all the time. And sooner or later, we will get a line break, and we might get the rafts drifting on a storm surge and ending up kind of stranded on Assateague Island or somewhere where they're really difficult to remove. So we do want to minimize the risk. And the second part of the question would be that we also feel that that same risk is ever present. So however many summers we have these islands out there, there's always risk of something untoward happening. We don't want to come to rely on this technology for the whole population of common terns. I mean, this summer, there was so much, the terns nesting on the natural islands and beaches around the coastal bays did so poorly that this little colony of 23 pairs was the largest colony of common terns in the coastal bays. So we think the best strategy is to actually rely on natural islands, a program of rebuilding those. I guess another part of the answer is that, this is a fairly small island that can support a fairly small number of terns, but if we're going to have large colonies of not just common terns, but also black skimmers and royal terns, we're going to need much bigger nesting sites for them, colony sites. And those are best provided by natural islands.
So are there any efforts underway to help those natural nesting sites to restore some
Well,
of them or protect them?
We're just about to start those. Back in April, I wrote to the Secretary of DNR requesting that DNR sponsors the rebuilding of Skimmer Island with sand dredged in the next round of dredging, which is probably going to happen in about a year. So the US Army Corps has some dredging of sand planned, and they're going to use that sand for a couple of different things. It's kind of a complicated setup. The sand gets used to rebuild the northern end or replenish the northern end of Assateague Island, which is constantly eroding due to longshore drift from the north. It's also used for rebuilding the beaches at Ocean City. And then there's a scour hole on the western side of the Ocean City harbor, which threatens to undermine some very big, expensive houses across the harbor from the Ocean City inlet. And so the Corps is going to fill that scour hole with material as well. We're starting to try to make the argument that rebuilding Skimmer Island would only take about 2 or 3% of all this sand that is mined from various places for these other purposes, and that we want to try to get the Army Corps and DNR to kind of incorporate the maintenance of Skimmer Island and 1 or 2 other islands as well, kind of into a regular program of sand placement. And we're just, we've written 1 letter to the DNR secretary. I'm going to start working with Maryland Coastal Bays program to really start strategizing on this, and to kind of get together with DNR, the Army Corps, to try to see how we can put a plan together.
Great. So do you have to apply for permits again for 2022?
Well, yes, that's a really good question. The permit that we got this spring is a 5-year permit. And so we don't need to apply for a new permit, but our plans for next year are that we'd like to double the size of the island. We are going to get our builders to build another 5 of these 16 by 16 units. And we're going to add those to the island to make it a 48-foot by 48-foot island. And so this is a little over double the size. We think that should be able to support easily 100 pairs of common terns. And our hope is that with such a big colony, we can maybe pull in and attract some black skimmers to make a little colony on the edge of it, so that we can actually have 2 of our state endangered birds nesting on the island then. That's our big plan for next year. And we need to get a modification to our permit to allow for the larger size.
So what about the oyster catchers?
Yes, they can find somewhere else to nest, I guess. Yeah, we don't want to see them guys back.
Yeah.
I think next year, if we can get the island placed by the middle of April, so that it's all set up when the common terns return in late April, the hope is that the common terns will find it before the oyster catchers do. And once the terns are there in numbers and displaying that aggressive territorial behavior, the oyster catchers will either not try to nest there, or if they do, they'll just kind of accept the presence of the terns and not get too territorial.
Any limitation on the availability of clamshell or oyster shell?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to find.
Yeah.
There's a single supplier up in New Jersey that seems to be the main source of clamshell throughout the Mid-Atlantic. And we had to hunt around to get our 8 tons of clamshell last spring. We got them to deliver it from New Jersey to the boat ramp the morning of when we were, actually it's the day before I think we launched the island. So I think what I'll do is I'll just phone up the same supplier, but a little bit earlier. I'll phone them up in February and put in an order and say we need this in April.
What about using gravel? Wouldn't work for these?
We discussed various types of substrate. First of all, we wrote off sand. And the reason we wrote off sand was that the grain size is so small that it would probably hold water after rainstorms and make the island really heavy. And so it would ride much lower in the water. We don't want to add too much weight to the island, and we don't want the weight of the island to vary a lot through the season. Pea gravel, we thought about pea gravel, and I can't remember the reason why we didn't use it. There was quite a discussion about it. I think initially we thought that we could get away, that the best combination would be a 50-50 mix of pea gravel and clamshell. But in the end, when we found a supplier for the clamshell, I think we figured that the irregular sizes of the pieces of clamshell would shed water faster. Even pea gravel would probably hold a certain amount of water following a storm. So we figured that the clamshell was the best substrate.
Dave, this is Hal.
Hey, Hal.
I know somewhere I saw a picture, and I know that you were your barge was visited by a barn owl.
Yes.
Do you have any plans to deal with that problem?
That's a great question. The barn owl showed up at the very end of the breeding season, I think after the common terns had left. And Dave Brinker thinks it might be a dispersing juvenile. But it does show that it's possible for owls to find this place. And if an owl does show up, then we've got problems and we'll have to deal with it quickly. So I imagine, you know, there's probably provisions by which, especially under the Endangered Species Act, by which DNR could trap and euthanize an intruding owl.
I should think herring gulls would be even more of a threat.
Yeah, it's interesting. They weren't a big problem this year, and we're just going to have to see how it goes in future years. The nearest gull colony, I think it's an island called Mark 12, which is about maybe 4 or 5 miles away. Not that many gulls on, there's not that many great blackback gulls, at least on South Point spoils, I don't think. But you know, these predators are certainly an ever-present threat. So we're going to have to just, you know, monitor things closely in future years for sure.
Was there any evidence that skimmers visited the island at all?
No, we didn't get any kind of camera images of skimmers. But they certainly passed through as migrants, and I think a couple of skimmers tried to nest on the north end of Assateague this year. They weren't successful, unfortunately. And of course, Skimmer Island was just not really available for them. But hopefully, if we, you know, next year, if we have enough common terns, enough common tern activity by early May, that skimmers will, you know, will actually colonize next year. That's our big hope.
So someone had
Dave,
asked if there's any way we can help, or any of us, do you need volunteers to help with anything?
Yeah, we do. We probably will need volunteers in the spring on launch day, raking shells and things like that. So we won't need a large number because we have quite a few coastal bay staff and we have a little cadre of volunteers that the coastal bays organizes. But if anyone would love to come and get involved, let me know, and we can let you know when you're needed.
Great.
Dave, has there been any consideration for Skimmer Island and Tern Island to build some type of revetment around the islands to help with the sand that you're pumping in, that it would stay there and just not erode away?
It's a really good question. I've discussed this a little bit with Dave Brinker, and normally you don't want stone revetments around an island for nesting birds like terns, but we think it probably will be necessary when we get to the stage of, when we've got the Corps to agree to provide the sand to rebuild the island. I think a solution is going to have to be to protect part of the shore. I think it's the nor'easters that are the big part of the problem. So what we might well end up doing is, using stone to protect the northern and eastern sides of Skimmer and leave the southern and western side, natural. But yeah, it's a good thought. I think we are going to have to do that, realistically speaking, just to kind of really cut down on the rate of erosion.
Might think about offshore, segmented breakwaters just off the island. So what you're doing is breaking up the wave action, but not necessarily inhibiting.
We would. I think and that's a great suggestion. I think what we would do is work with Army Corps engineers to kind of find the best configuration, because they would probably study the currents around it and produce some kind of map which would tell us where we would need to put stone.
Was it inadvertent that Dave decided to use these things as sections and that they sort of decoupled the wave action, or was just that was awful lucky?
Yeah, it was part of the discussion, actually. I think I can tell you a little bit more about the design of these things. We based it on a design of a 16 by 16 foot fixed platform that's been used in Toronto. And we took that, and our builders said, well, we're going to need different materials because of the salt water in the bays. And then they got with Dave Brinker and really started thinking the design through in detail. And that's where they realized we'd need these 8 foot wide, smallest units and the wheeled floats. And I remember at a meeting about a year ago, we talked about the fact that the hinge, the latches and the joins might well function to kind of take energy out of the swell and allow the island to flex. And that's exactly how it seems to be working.
Great.
So, yeah, it's great to see it withstand those really rough weather conditions.
Any other questions for Dave?
Didn't mention cost on this thing. Was there any estimated total cost for the one you built?
Yeah, I believe it was $50,000 altogether.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you. 50,000, and I think so it'll probably cost about the same to build, to double the size of the island. So that includes, paying the builders, the cost of the materials. It doesn't actually include other staff time. There are quite a few staff out there. You've got me working on it, and Kevin Smith and Roman Jessian and all that, and other folks from DNR as well. So but that I think in the big scheme of things, that's not overly expensive.
I agree.
Endangered species, and the state is, kind of obligated by law to try to recover the populations.
Mhm.
So I definitely want to credit Dave Brinker with he's the backbone of this project.
Yeah.
He's kind of the genius behind a lot of the design of the whole thing, monitoring it, actually going out there every week by boat to monitor it, maintaining the cameras and the audio lures, making sure everything's working. He is, well, as you know, he's an amazing field biologist, and we're very lucky to have him in Maryland.
I think it was up to him. He'd create 48 hours in every day, and humans that don't sleep.
And he still wouldn't sleep, right? Yeah.
He's the atypical. He's the ever ready bunny.
Yeah.
Energizer bunny, whichever one it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Dave, I have one more question. Have you guys given consideration to whether there's advantages to maybe having two separate islands this size as opposed to one bigger one?
We have.
Maybe
We
less
have.
less attractive to gulls or something. I don't know.
Well,
Or-
the big prize we're trying to go for is the Black Skimmer colony. And so we figured if we have one big island where we can just get as many common terns as possible, that is probably going to maximize our chance of attracting black skimmers, because they want to assess how much tern activity there is, because those terns will be protecting, the black skimmer nests when they get established. So that's what we're going for.
It'll be fun to watch and see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll have our fingers crossed. It's and I just hope that next year it goes as smoothly as this year, and that we have some terrible disaster like great horned owls and lines breaking and the ending up on Assateague Island. That wouldn't be good. So let's hope it's really smooth like this year.
Some of that is why I was wondering about two islands. It would prevent maybe disaster on one, wiping out the whole effort. But
no, it's a good point. It's a good point. That's a question of, do you put all your eggs in one basket, right? So
I think it's a good choice also, Dave, to put it in a more remote area like you chose to get it away from these curious boaters and active boating community,
Yeah, that was a big consideration for us. And the main navigation channel that goes through the coastal bays, it's actually the intracoastal waterway, goes just the other side of South Point Spoils. And I think you can see when you're at the island at the nesting platform, you see boats going by the other side, and it's kind of nice that from there they can't really see the platform. And there's a long, like, projecting to the southwest of South Point Spoils, there's a kind of a spur of really shallow water, like a sandy shoal that goes all the way down. And so you'd have to be really determined to kind of go in there. You wouldn't find it by chance. There's a few crab pots nearby. So there's a few crabbers that do go near it. But we were lucky to find a pretty protected and kind of secluded place.
Well, Dave, thank you so much. This was an amazing project. Kudos to you and Dave Brinker and everyone involved. And we look forward to even better success, as I'm sure you do, next year.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. It's been a really rewarding project. It's been probably the most exciting thing I've done, since I started working with Audubon.
Very well presented tonight, Dave. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Might just have to have you back next year.
Yeah, well, I'll come back and report again. So,
Yeah.
those video clips, they're pretty cool, aren't they?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Our best
All
to
right.
date, by the way.
How many years of funding do you have?
Well, it's from DNR, so it's being funded, year to year. Hopefully they'll be able to fund it, continuously. Of course, the money, what we'd be asking for the SAM management plan would actually be a lot more money than what we're spending on this. So our big hope, I don't know if we have another couple of minutes, but
Oh yeah, go ahead.
is that the Restore America's Wildlife Act will pass. This is a federal act that hasn't been introduced yet, but it will hopefully be introduced soon in the Senate and the House. And it calls for a lot of money to be put into, given to states for wildlife conservation. And the amount of money that would come to Maryland, it would basically increase the Natural Heritage Program budget by something like 15 times.
Wow.
I think it's
Wow.
about on that scale. And right now, I'm working with other groups where we're trying to persuade Senator Cardin to sponsor the bill. And we really want it to pass this session if we can. And I think it'll be a real game changer, and it will enable projects like this to be that much more secure.
And that would be a permanent source of funding, if
Yes,
I
it
remember
would.
right. Yeah.
It would. So.
Well, let us know if you need any support, letter writing to the right people for any of this stuff.
Well, I'll certainly work with Kurt to get MOS to sign the letter. So I don't know whether individual bird clubs sign letters or whether they are affiliated closely enough with MOS that the MOS signature kind of does it. But
I think individual bird clubs can if they want to.
okay.
We've done a couple, but they've been jointly with Kurt. Those are kind of Anne Arundel specific issues.
Okay, well, I could always circulate the letter to you when it's ready.
Great.
Would it help to support convincing the mayor of Ocean City to let you have a little bit of the sand?
Yeah, when the time comes, certainly if anyone here knows, people down there and have a little bit of leverage with them, it'd be really good to have all the kind of diplomatic help and arm twisting that we can get, So,
they might get some PR benefit out of it as well,
That's right. I mean, I think we're going to have to employ multiple strategies, involving getting public support and individuals that have influence. There's a reason why the SAM management plan hasn't happened yet, because it's going to take a little bit of diplomatic finesse and be and a lot of stamina. So I think we're going to have to work on it. It could take a few years to really get going, but we have to do it for the birds. I think without it,
everything.
Yeah.
Well, and it's great to know we've got things going on, groups like Audubon, superhuman people like Dave Brinker working on things. I mean, it makes me feel like we're really moving in the right direction and we have momentum.
Very much agree with you, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, I think we are just past 8:30. I will stop the recording here in a second and people can stay on to chat as long as they want. But Dave, again, thanks. Great presentation, great project.
Thanks,
We're
Dave.
behind you. We're behind you all the way.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's been really great talking with you. And it's good to see familiar faces. And I look forward to the time that we can meet in person again,
We all do.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Well,
Good
bye,
night, everyone.
bye, everyone. And thanks for your interest.
All right.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
Right.